Uncovered my girlfriend's Masai debt just as we started our fertility journey, and now we're reevaluating marriage and future plans. My girlfriend and I have been together for 2 years, living together in my house. There's still about £70,000 left on the mortgage, a 15-year deal, and I'm the sole owner. She contributes £150 a month toward utilities at my request, nothing more. The other night, I found myself joking with her, asking, "Do you have any secret debt that I'll only find out about when we get married?" She just laughed and said no, insisting she always covers at least the minimum on her credit cards. I couldn't help but laugh and told her that making minimum payments is still being in debt. She genuinely argued, saying as long as she's paying, it's not really debt. That floored me. How could she not see that? It shook me how financially oblivious she seemed. It's been weighing on me more than usual because we're deep in the process of starting our NHS fertility journey. We even have an appointment soon, and since we're a same-sex couple, there's a high chance we'll need to go private. I've been saving for ages but also asked her to put together a baby fund. She started setting aside £20 a week, but I know she's already dipped into it. She doesn't have any real savings. Today, I point blank asked her if she knew how much debt she's actually in. She just shrugged. I don't know. I pressed, is it £500? £1,000? £5,000? She waved her hand, yeah, something like that. I tried to pin her down and asked, something like what? But she was vague as ever. Honestly, I don't think she's hiding anything. I genuinely think she doesn't understand what debt means. She even thought I only meant money she's stopped paying entirely, which is wild to me. Apparently, she was supposed to consolidate her 3 credit card debts onto a 0% card, but a PIN wasn't working when she tried to register. I asked her when she started the application process. When I went to visit my family, she said. That was last November. I couldn't believe it. I've been busy, she admitted. I tried to stay calm and suggested, for her own good, that she at least check what she owes on each card, and what the interest rates are. She started making excuses, couldn't access one account, didn't have the app for the other 2, though she admitted she could log in if she wanted. But she wouldn't, she just shrugged, I don't know. At that point, I had to walk away before I said something I'd regret. She swears her total debt is less than £2,000, but I just can't trust that anymore unless I see it with my own eyes. I told her once we're married, her debt becomes my responsibility too, so this really matters. She has ADHD, which I know affects her timekeeping and spending, but I had no idea it was this serious. Now, I'm genuinely worried, could this be a deal breaker for us? She got upset, started crying, and sobbed, is this why you don't want to marry me? Honestly, I just hate being the center of attention. I had to leave the house to get some air because the tension was overwhelming. Even now, I know she's still crying in the living room. I'm left wondering, am I being irrational? Have I pushed her too hard? I just want to know how to help her and approach this in a way that leads to real change. Later, after I'd had some time to think about all your advice, I sat down with her again for a long talk. I tried to help her understand why this is important and why she can't keep putting it off. She admitted she wants to get a handle on her money so it stops hanging over her, and asked for my help. I suggested checking her total debt on ClearScore, thanks to whoever recommended it, and she agreed. We set up her account together, and that's when we both found out she has 5 credit cards and £8,000 in debt. My heart dropped. I felt a mini heart attack coming on, but I kept my cool because I didn't want to make her feel ashamed. She looked at me, her voice shaky, and asked, is this something I can handle? I told her yes, but it would take longer than she expected, probably more like 2 or 3 years to pay off, rather than by the end of this year as she'd been telling herself. That seemed to ground her, and she insisted on handing me all her credit cards and giving me access to her accounts so I could help her track where every penny goes. I'm a budgeting freak, so this felt like a real sign she wants to change. We agreed to financial meetings every fortnight. She's planning to transfer £5,000, the high interest part of her debt, onto the 0% interest card she finally registered, and we'll tackle the rest one step at a time. The baby fund, unfortunately, is officially on hold for now. But I think this was the massive wake-up call she desperately needed. Being a mum has always been her dream, and seeing this debt as the roadblock really hit home. The only good thing, if you can even call it that, is that she wasn't lying to me. She truly didn't know how much debt she was in, because once her anxiety got too high, she just stopped checking. At least, she's never missed a payment. Now, I just hope we can work through this together and build from here. Update 1. 3 months ago, my world tilted when I realized just how financially illiterate my girlfriend really was, not in a forgot to budget this month kind of way, but in a way that left me genuinely stunned. She honestly believed that paying off a credit card wasn't being in debt, but rather something more akin to a mortgage. I know. It seemed unbelievable, and yet, there I was, facing the unimaginable. Digging a little deeper, I discovered she was in over her head with credit card debt. What shocked me most was that she didn't even know the exact amount she owed. She was that ashamed and in denial about the whole situation. It turned out she had 5 credit cards. I only knew about 2, not because she was actively hiding the rest, but simply because the topic had never come up. I couldn't let this go. With her consent, I signed her up for clear score so we could finally see the real numbers staring back at us. £8,250 in credit card debt, all on cards charging over 30% interest. That number hit her hard. My disappointment was the wake-up call she desperately needed. I've always been extremely money savvy. I have enough savings that I could have wiped her debt clean without blinking. But those are my hard-earned savings, sacrificed for over the years, and it wouldn't have been fair for her to sidestep these lessons. She never once asked me to do it, to her credit. I told her I'd teach her about finances, search for better options to transfer her debt, and help her plan, but ultimately, the sacrifice would have to come from her. Otherwise, she'd never learn. I started off by building her a custom version of my budgeting spreadsheet because, honestly, until then, she didn't even know where her money vanished each month. At first, I'd sit with her twice a week, combing through her bank statements, categorizing every single transaction. Gradually, she took over and began updating it herself weekly, while I worked on my own beside her. We turned our sessions into financial meetings, brewing a nice tea and talking through her accounts together. After 2 months, the fog began to clear. We spotted patterns. Take entertainment subscriptions, for example. She'd been paying for Prime, Netflix, Apple TV, Disney+, and Now TV. Yet we only watched Disney, which I get free with my Lloyd's account, and Netflix. She canceled the rest right away. Her progress didn't stop there. We worked together to transfer most of her debt from high-interest cards to a 0% interest balance transfer offer, starting with the card with the highest interest. She cut out unnecessary spending, cold turkey. I know the conventional wisdom is that all money should go to debt before saving, but I wanted her to feel the small, immediate reward that comes from watching her savings actually grow. She had nothing in savings before. Now, on every payday, I encouraged her to transfer an amount to her savings account, and keep it there, then pay toward her debt, so she immediately knows how much is left for the rest of the month. We built in small tricks to help her curb spontaneous spending. I took custody of all her credit cards. She disabled Google Pay and contactless payments, forcing herself to physically insert the card and enter a PIN for every purchase. That extra little step made all the difference. All these measures have started to pay off. After 3 months, for the first time in years, her debt didn't increase, it started to shrink. She's chipped away £1,700 from her total, even though a good chunk got eaten up by interest before we managed that balance transfer. Now, she's at £7,000 in debt, down from £8,250, and she's stashed away £400 in savings, which is a first for her. The thought that, without the debt, she'd currently have £2,100 already in savings has only fueled her determination to keep going. I've realized that some people just need patience, support, and trust, especially if your partner struggles with money management. I couldn't be prouder of her, seeing her motivated to reach the goal I set, clearing every last penny before Christmas 2026. Change is absolutely possible, and she's living proof, step by step, that she can do it. Update 2. First, the clinic appointment finally came around. We went in thinking it would be a gentle chat about next steps and waiting lists. It wasn't. We sat there holding hands and were told, very matter-of-factly, that because we're a same-sex couple in our area, we'd have to self-fund a number of IUIs before the NHS would even consider picking up IVF. The number wasn't 1 or 2. It was 6. The room felt smaller. They offered bloods and scans while we were there, and we said yes because we're already here. We might as well get something useful from the morning. 2 days later, her AMH came back low for her age. Not catastrophic, the nurse said, but we wouldn't want to wait years. That sentence has been on loop in my head ever since. It's like everything we'd been carefully ordering into neat columns and tidy pots suddenly developed a deadline we can't argue with. She cried in the car, quiet little sobs that she tried to swallow. I put the heater on and left us sitting in the same parking spot for half an hour. Neither of us reached for the radio. Meanwhile, at home, my spreadsheet had been happily marching the debt down to £6,400 and then £6,100, and I'd allowed myself to breathe like we were on a simple, predictable slope. Then I properly went through her bank statements line by line looking for money we could redirect to a fertility pot. I kept seeing Klarna, ClearPay, Lay-by, little nibbles that never registered in her mind as debt because they only take it in 4 chunks and I never miss one. I could feel that old cold feeling creep up my neck. We sat down that evening with every login and every email and added them all up. £1,180 outstanding across buy now pay later accounts that had somehow been invisible to us because they never appear on the same screen. She just stared at the number. That's not proper debt, though, she started, then stopped herself and whispered, no. I know. I watched her understand it in real time and it hurt and helped all at once. We had a day where the air in the house was brittle. She went to bed early. I sat at the table and drafted 3 versions of a plan, then binned all 3. The next morning she came into the kitchen with puffy eyes and said, right. Tell me what has to happen. I can do hard things if I know why I'm doing them. I asked her to make 2 phone calls I knew she'd hate. One to the card that still had a rotten APR on a small balance and one to her old mobile provider that had a lingering default from £180 3 years ago when she moved flats and forgot to cancel. She couldn't even say default without wincing. But she did it. She rang them with me at the table, explained the situation, asked for goodwill. The mobile company agreed to mark it as settled the moment the payment cleared. She paid it on the spot, like ripping off a plaster. The card company, miracle of miracles, offered to move that remaining balance onto a 0% offer for 12 months with a fee. She took it. I watched her shoulders drop a centimeter. Then we changed tack. We'd been trying to do everything at once, pay debt down hard, keep a little emergency savings to stop her panicking, and trickle a baby fund to feel like we were moving towards something. The test results didn't leave room for trickles. We agreed to build a ring-fenced pot for 2 IUIs this year, and keep the debt paydown at a steady, less aggressive pace rather than sprinting and then face-planting. It felt like betrayal, at first, to slow the snowball. It also felt like choosing our life together, rather than just our numbers. She said, if we never try because of the debt, I'll resent the debt forever. If we try while we're still fixing it, I'll resent it less. That settled it. Practically, we got scrappy. We sold things, not in a sad way, no heirlooms, but in a cathartic, Saturday morning with flasks of tea way. We did a car boot and came home 312 pounds richer and 5 boxes lighter. She listed clothes on Vinted and was buzzing every time her phone pinged with a £7 sale. My favorite moment was when she found a designer handbag at the back of a cupboard that she'd bought in a treat myself fog years ago and never used. She sat with it on her lap for a long minute, then took photos and listed it. It sold in a day for £180. She handed me the cash the second it hit her account like it was hot. Put it straight into the pot before I get nostalgic. She laughed, and then she cried, and then she laughed again. That was the day I knew she was genuinely changing. There were stumbles. She switched one of her card payments from manual to direct debit, then assumed that meant it was sorted forever. The first payment didn't catch in time and she technically missed it by a day. Older would have ignored the emails until the bank wrote in stern letters. Knew her rang them immediately, explained, and they reinstated the promotional rate and refunded the fee. When she hung up she turned to me and said, I felt like I did something grown up. It was adorable and heartbreaking all at once. We also did something I never thought I'd suggest. We opened a new account just for her bills and essentials, and moved her salary there. On payday, everything leaves that account automatically to the right places. What's left after debt and savings gets swept to a separate card she can physically use without touching anything important. She calls it her pocket money and I winced the first time because it sounded patronizing, but it was her wording and it works. She finally got her ADHD assessment, got a formal diagnosis, and started medication 2 weeks ago. It's early days, but she sat through an entire admin hour last Sunday without getting up once. She actually enjoyed color-coding her pots. She said her brain felt quiet enough to listen. As for the numbers, because I know people will be curious even if I won't bore you with every line, debt sits at £5,950 now if you count everything, including the BNPL that is being hoovered up and not replaced. The fertility pot is at £1,740 and rising. It is coming from side hustles, overtime, and all those subscription corpses we dug out of the garden. We've paused any baby purchases. We had a wobble in a shop where she fell in love with a tiny sleep suit with little elephants and I had to physically steer us away like a tugboat. We bought nothing. We went home and put £20 into the pot instead and watched the number tick up together. That felt better than any impulse buy ever has for her, and she said so out loud. There is still £70,000 on the mortgage and she still gives me £150 towards the bills and nothing more, which some people would judge, but I don't need her money for the house. I need her to become the kind of person who doesn't hide from hard things. This month she wasn't late for a single financial meeting. She actually reminded me. She's the one who suggested we book the follow-up with the clinic to plan our first IOI for late summer if the pot hits the target by then. I promised her we will walk into that appointment with our heads up. She looked relieved. So did I. We're still very much in the thick of it. The story isn't neat and it isn't finished. But today she messaged me from work to say she'd cancelled an Uber and walked because she wanted to see the pot flick up by another $5, and if you'd told me 3 months ago that would be the message I'd get, I'd have laughed you out of the room. I didn't expect the villain of our relationship to morph into this quiet, shared project we do together, in between ordinary life and making dinner and arguing about whether ketchup belongs in the fridge. It does. It's not glamorous. It's not dramatic every day. But it is ours, and we're building something on purpose now, rather than just hoping it doesn't all fall apart. Update 3. 2 things happened at once and I'm still not sure which one made my stomach drop more. The clinic rang on a Wednesday morning and said they wanted a hysterosal pingogram before they greenlight any cycles. We need to know her tubes aren't blocked. The night before, out of nowhere, HMRC pinged her with a small tax rebate from a job she forgot she'd had for 3 months during COVID. £286. It felt like the world leaving exact change on the counter and walking out. We booked the HSG immediately and I moved that £286 into the pot before she could blink. The HSG was exactly as undignified as everyone says. Lemon yellow chairs. Paper gown that rustled every time she breathed. She squeezed my fingers so hard I lost color and apologized mid-cramp, which made the radiographer snort. They tilted the screen so we could see and there it was, dye slipping through and out both sides like a magic trick. Clear. No obstacles. She cried purely from relief while still lying on the table, and I held her shoe because it had somehow ended up under a trolley. We got a very NHS have a paracetamol and a biscuit, and we walked back to the car like penguins. In the car park, she said, through a mouthful of hobnob, "Okay. No more excuses." At home the spreadsheet had been quietly doing its little dances. We'd cleared the last of the BNPL vampires, finally. She'd closed 2 of the accounts and put merchant blocks in her bank app for the other names that used to ping like slot machines. She toggles them on and off herself now, which makes me oddly proud. When we logged into ClearScore that night, the default from the old phone bill showed as settled and her score ticked up a notch into the fair band. She actually took a photo of the screen and sent it to me from the sofa like I wasn't 2 feet away. Debt sat at £5,120, which in my head translated into just over 5 months of the old you, just under a year of the new you. We went to the donor consultation on a Saturday morning because it felt less frightening to do it when the city was full of dog walkers. I didn't expect choosing the genetics of a hypothetical person to feel like online shopping. You filter by height and eye color and CMV status, and then you read essays about favorite childhood books and who they want to be when they're 40. We set boundaries. No celebrity lookalikes. No obsessing about perfect. We picked someone who played the piano badly and loved hiking in the rain and wrote about his grandmother's dumplings like they were a religion. She squeezed my knee and said, "He sounds like someone we'd have over for roast and board games." We chose an open ID donor and I clicked the payment button with both hands because it felt indecent to do it with one. The invoice made me blink. Vial, shipping, storage, and we sat there counting backwards through our own numbers until I found the £180 from that handbag and mentally laid it down on the table like an offering. We were £82 short of what the clinic wanted for securing the vial, and, swear to God, her Vinted pinged with a £10 sale while we were trying not to hyperventilate. We listed half the airing cupboard and bridged the gap in 48 hours. I've never been so grateful for a badly timed trend for linen shirts. The cycle itself crept up faster than either of us had prepared for. Her next period came 4 days early, which meant the clinic suddenly had slots and we had 48 hours to do baseline bloods, a scan and pick up meds. I answered the phone at my desk and wrote Ovitrel on the back of an envelope like it was a magic word. We had to collect the trigger from the pharmacy with the big scary fridge. She carried it like it might explode. The nurse taught her to inject in her tummy and she swore and then laughed because it didn't hurt as much as her brain had promised it would. We stood in the kitchen at 9:30 p.m., counting down from 10 together, and she said, "If this works, I'm going to be fond of this exact bit of my lower stomach forever." Practicalities made everything feel ordinary again in the next breath. The car failed its mow the same week with a suspension thing that sounded like a fake word. £528. Oldest would have quietly raided the nearest pile with no label. Newest looked at the screen and then at each other and agreed, out loud, that the emergency fund was actually for emergencies and the OI pot was sacred. We paid from the right place, the OI fund stayed intact, and she messaged me 2 days later to say she'd picked up an extra Saturday shift because I want the emergency number to look plump again. She's not poetic often, but that, weirdly, was. Insemination day was the most nothing special day I've ever lived. A Tuesday. We took the bus because parking at the clinic is extortionate and she wanted to feel like it was just another appointment so she wouldn't panic. The nurse was kind without being syrupy. It took all of 5 minutes. We lay there afterwards, in a quiet room that smelled of antiseptic and hay fever, laughing at the ceiling for no reason. On the bus home she leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "We did it," like it was a secret. We ate crisps from Boots on a bench and discussed what we should make for tea and where ketchup belongs because apparently we can't go a week without that argument. The 2-week wait was a personality test I did not sign up for. She organized drawers and suddenly decided that every sock we owned needed to be rolled like sushi. She put all her apps back on the home screen because she said hunting for them made her feel itchy. She had a wobble in the middle of it. A friend's hen do landed with a £120 deposit and the WhatsApp group was pinging with a Klarna option available banner like it had clocked her IP address. She walked into the living room, handed me her phone and said, "If I put this on payment plan I'll hate myself on test day, won't I?" We rejigged the food shop. I cooked from the freezer for a week. She walked home in the rain instead of getting an Uber twice, and we paid the deposit up front. She screenshotted the confirmation and set it as her lock screen for the day just to remind herself she'd done it properly. Test day was a Sunday and it was stark white. She cried into my pajama top in that quiet way that doesn't look like crying unless you know where to look. We didn't tell anyone we were trying, so there was no one to perform strength for. We just went back to bed at 10 a.m. with the cat and decided we were allowed to watch cartoons like we were ill. In the afternoon she went for a walk alone and came back with 2 hot chocolates and muddy shoes. "Second try," she said, and I saw her put the grief down enough to hold that thought. The numbers held. The donor vial and cycle knocked the pot down hard, obviously. It sat stubbornly at £540 until the middle of the month, and then every little thing we'd planted started fruiting again. Over time, a friend who owed her £30 since 2021 finally had a rush of conscience, the last of the streaming refunds, the tax rebate, the linen shirts. When I checked this morning the OI pot is back at £1,280, which is one more Saturday at the market and one less Deliveroo and a handful of £7. Vinted sales away from the second try. The debt is at £4,670. She made a point of telling me before I noticed, which feels important. She also asked, out of nowhere, to bump her Bill's contribution to £200 from next month. I want to feel like I live here on paper as much as I live here in real life. I kissed her in the middle of the spreadsheet and she wrinkled her nose at me because she hates being kissed when she's concentrating. She's different. Not perfect. She forgot a standing order once and remembered it 3 hours later and cried because she thought she'd ruined everything. And then she phoned the bank, fixed it, and ate dinner like a human being. The meds are helping more days than not. Her admin hour is now 2. She ordered a tiny timer that beeps every 25 minutes and calls it her brain bell. She finally deleted Uber Eats. She keeps the icon in the app library as a kind of trophy she doesn't touch. We booked the follow-up for mid-autumn because the clinic's diary is chaos and we wanted to buy ourselves time to stack the numbers again. We walk more. We argue less. We say no to small things so we can say yes to big ones. And last night, when we were making tea, she put the ketchup on the counter between us and said, "Peace treaty." I put it back in the fridge and she rolled her eyes and transferred £15 to the pot like it was a punchline. It was funny in the way that feels like a handrail. We're not out of the woods. But there's a path now, and it has our footprints on it. Update 4. We accidentally got married on a Thursday. Not really accidentally, no one trips and falls into a registrar's office, but it felt like that kind of energy. The clinic sent over the fee consent forms with a brisk note about witnesses and legal parenthood and I lay awake for 3 nights thinking about the boxes we could tick now versus paperwork we'd have to chase later. I hate being looked at. She hates planning things with more than 3 moving parts. We booked the smallest slot they had, told exactly 2 friends who were available on their lunch breaks, and wore things we already owned. We swapped rings at a table that looked like it usually did bus passes and lost dog notices. The registrar asked if we wanted music and I said no because I had a lump in my throat and would have cried to anything, including hold music. We signed, kissed, cried like idiots, and then stood outside on the pavement taking a selfie where you can see the kebab shop in the background. It cost less than a decent night out and came with a certificate that made me feel very calm. We ate chips out of paper on a park bench. She wiped vinegar off my cheek with her sleeve and said, "Now if I die you get my cactus collection and a seat at the hospital bed." It was grim and romantic in that particular way that suits us. The money didn't stop to clap. She bumped her standing order to £200 like she said she would. No big speech, just a line in my banking app on the 1st of the month, and then promptly texted me a screenshot of her balance because she wanted me to see she'd done it early, before my brain does that thing. Work announced pay reviews at her place and she came home with a 3% bump that doesn't set the world on fire but made her stand a bit taller. We sat down and fed the extra into the plan. A smidge more to debt, a smidge more to the emergency fund because the washing machine started making a noise like cutlery on a trampoline and then actually died mid-spin with a wet duvet inside like a hostage. Oldest would have stared at the Yoi pot and made a terrible decision. Newest lifted the emergency fund lid, paid for a second-hand machine from Facebook Marketplace that looks like it's seen some things but works like a dream, and she spent a Saturday morning running towels through like a little laundry goblin to stop herself crying at the invoice. Afterward she made tea, held the mug in both hands and said, "We did that right, didn't we?" We did. The second Yoi happened almost politely. Her cycle played ball, the clinic had a slot at a civilized hour, and we took the same bus with the same elderly man who grumbles at the driver about exact change every time. We're creatures of habit now. The nurse recognized us and put the speculum on the warmer because she's an angel. We lay in the quiet again and stared at a ceiling tile with a stain that looked like a rabbit if you squinted. When we got home she stuck the clinic wristband to the fridge next to the council tax bill as if to say, "Both of you are real and neither of you get to win." The 2-week wait was kinder and crueler at once. She didn't try to earn it this time with neat drawers or sushi socks. She went about her life and let it sit next to her like an extra cat you can't pet. On day 11 she bled. Not properly, not yet. She looked at me with a face I will remember when I'm 80. We didn't test. We waited a day. On day 12 we got a faint line, the kind that makes you hold your breath and tilt the stick like that might change the chemistry. She cried a weird, beautiful kind of cry and put her palm flat against her stomach like she was thanking someone. On day 14 it was gone. I watched something inside her drop and then rearrange itself. She curled into me and said, very quietly, "At least we know they can find each other." I think I'll hear that sentence in empty rooms for a long time. We didn't spiral. That feels like a small miracle. She messaged her manager and moved one shift so we could go and sit with the clinic and look at our options like grown-ups, and we did. The doctor was as kind as the first time but more direct. Low AMH doesn't mean no chance, it does mean playing a different game. We talked about doing one more EOI because there's a vial already in storage and she wants to give that narrative a fair shot, then moving to IVF before the calendar bullies us. The numbers made both of us suck our teeth. Vials, meds, retrieval, lab fees, the joy of paying someone to freeze embryos like little diamonds in a freezer we'll end up naming. But there wasn't that panic in my bones this time, just a steady drumbeat of, okay, so what do we need to put where? We left with a paper bag of leaflets and an agreement to come back in 6 weeks to set a date if we're not already pregnant. Back at home the spreadsheet looked like a friend who'd been keeping the porch light on. Debt is at £3,940 now. She closed another card and we cut it up at the kitchen table. The cat chased a triangle of plastic under the oven and we left it there like a time capsule. Her credit report crept up into good, which made her grin in a way that would have annoyed me if it hadn't been so deserved. The EOI pot took the hit but didn't evaporate. We're at £870 after we paid for storage and meds and the bus tickets and the slightly embarrassing celebratory McFlurry we pretended was for the cat. People talk about big, sweeping sacrifices, but most of ours look like walking past a bakery and not going in. She keeps saying no to tiny, noisy things so we can say yes to the big quiet ones. She cancelled a hen do add-on she didn't actually want and sent me the confirmation without commentary, just a little fox emoji as if to say, clever. She also, out of the clear blue sky, corralled her own admin hour into 2.5 and did her tax code thing she's been avoiding for months, and then printed it and put it in a folder that she labeled alphabetically. Medication plus motivation is a strange, lovely alchemy. We told her mum, finally. Not everything, not the spreadsheets or the faint line, just the shape of it. Her mum hugged her so hard she squeaked and then pressed 200 pounds into her hand like a teenager who's getting on a bus to London for the first time. I tried to give it back and she gave me a look that could curdle milk. We put it in the EOI pot and I named it Mum Money on the line and she laughed from her stomach for the first time in weeks. In the same week, my energy supplier did that weird British thing where they realized they'd been sitting on our money and sent £148 back without warning. It was like someone throwing us a set of filings and a magnet at the same time. We tidied, wills, finally, because marriage made it feel less like tempting fate and more like putting the bins out. We sat in a solicitor's office that smelled of dust and roses and chose wording that made me blink hard. It was boring and monumental. There was one wobble that felt like a test we'd failed before and passed this time. She was walking home in the rain in a coat that remembers 2 winters ago more fondly than it should. She sent me a link to a sale and said, if I buy this I will feel like a human being and also want to throw up. Please tell me no, which is the most honest sentence she's ever put into my phone. I told her to come home. I handed her my waterproof that makes me look like a fisherman and she laughed until she hiccuped and walked the rest of the week in it. On payday she bought herself a second-hand coat for £22 and sent me a photo from the bus stop, hood up, grinning. There are 1,000 tiny ways to get there without setting yourself on fire. She finds more of them now. We penciled the 30 EOI for late winter, mostly because the clinic's diary looks like Tetris and because I wanted a month where our emergency number could puff itself back up and sit there smugly. We started walking in the evenings again. We put the ketchup in the cupboard for a whole week just to see if it would kill me. It didn't. On Sunday she slid 50 pounds across the table into the pot like we were in a film and said, from Mrs. Me to Mrs. You, and then immediately went pink and hid her face in her hands because she hates how cute she is. We are still not out of the woods. But we've stopped arguing with the trees about what shape they should be, and started concentrating on where our feet go next.